73. I heard my number called. I looked to Kami and made a judgment call. Kami, here. Take this and go see about yourself and good luck, okay? Kami's eyes looked wide with surprise. He told me that I shouldn't, but I reassured him that I will be fine and he deserves an opportunity to live out his last day free of worry. Thothlin, your daddy brought you up right and I know he is proud of you. Thank you very much. He started his way through the masses and I prayed he would make it safely through to be seen. I dare not tell Samantha of this, for she would surely remind me of how soft I can be even at the face of my own demise. I stand out there for hours. 87, 56, 30, 1, 30. The numbers for the raffle seemed endless. My legs became very heavy and I tried to walk, but the place was compacted so that if you took a breath you would be sure to share half of it. The office is about to close. The days seem to meld together and the mornings come quick. School is no longer a damn option. I need a job more so than trying to advance myself through education. I can't express the feelings racing through my mind. I have enough money saved for us to get by for 1 month. I walk door to door in search of work and I am turned away time after time after time. The load of the day takes its toll. I am so hungry that my mouth starts to salivate from the smell of roasted peanuts from the corner cart. What little money I have left is spent toward trying to find a job, so my need for nourishment takes a back seat. This is a situation that I could blame on my young life, but at the end of the day I can only blame myself for this. Not having enough foresight, not having enough confidence to change my circumstance. I have never been a person to rob or steal or conduct myself in a malefactor's type behavior. But the urge to survive and take care of my family has me reaching deeply in my thoughts for a way out. Well, I guess tomorrow will be better for me. I will stop by my son's school and pick him up and we can go home together. I know that my presence at the school will lead to speculation and that would be very difficult on a child in these times. I couldn't help but to think seeing Christian might motivate me or give me the push I need to stay vigorous in my pursuit. I noticed a crowd of kids gathered together just out front the school. I heard my child's voice stop it. I walk in the midst of the children and notice 3 boys hazing my son. What's going on here? I said while pulling the boys off my son. The children all ran off and I dropped to my knees helping my son up from the dirt, brushing the grass and dirt from his hair and his face. I asked, Christian, what's going on, man? He just utters nothing in his usually soft voice. I gave him a hug and told him everything will be fine. He replies, okay, Dad. I knew very well the problems with our society had begun and it was just a matter of time before it reached our doorsteps. With my last few bucks I stopped off and brought my son a snack and we started our walk home. Buying him something to eat meant that I would be walking from here on out, but I didn't mind. Anything to bring a smile to this kid meant everything, even something so small a gesture. I must say that as tough as these times were, it made you appreciate so much. The taste of a piece of fruit when you haven't had anything to eat, water when you haven't had anything to drink, makes you humble and grateful. I found comfort in that very sentiment. Daddy, do you really believe in God? I was taken back by his question. I always instilled in my son about having faith and about the Creator. My father explained to me as I am to my son, and he said, son, there is an energy that is constantly creating onto itself, ever moving, ever conscious. It is beyond our capability of understand, thus the ignorant cannot explain the how and why, nor can an ant explain the leaf that it moves upon. The beyond the vastness of space and comprehension is the Creator. My son then looked away as to ponder my explanation. His eyes swelled up with tears and he asked, Daddy, does God love me? Christian. God is the very word love. Of course he loves you. Why would you ask such a question, son? Because the world has no love in it. I reply, son, as long as you and I are alive there will always be love in this world. I lean over and kiss him on his forehead. I remind him not to worry, everything will be fine. I place a smile on my face, but deep down unfortunately my concerns would say otherwise. As we walk along hip to hip, my arm placed firmly on his shoulder as to comfort him and protect him. I began to speak of how I was brought up in a very different time, where people helped one another, and how I used to play with other children outside of my race, and that it never once crossed anyone's mind of just how different we were. I am so stated that maybe something happens to us once we leave the comforts of childhood. When to be responsible in today's society, you have to strip yourself of your innocence and become something else, something without care or mercy in the pursuit of surviving. However, never lose focus in your humanity and in God's will. Let Him lead your heart in making the right choices for you and your loved ones and your neighbors. I know, Christian, it will be hard facing the right choice for a bad situation, but you will find a way. I told him I loved him. Our walk home offered an array of noticeable signs of times people place on such a hard and guarded expression, void of anything human. If they shared a glance, it was more of a scan than a personal acknowledgement of our shared existence. People would strip you to the bone if they could gain by it. As the days go by, I find myself more in the likeness, but my company by my side keeps me focused and gives me strength and purpose. The walk home also has me reflecting on the who's and the whys of our society. Understand that a lot has been brought to light in these times of the why, to whom you are and your place in this world. You see, you have to pose this question: are you sheep or are you the shepherd? Every part of this question is truly the underlying function of this financial society. I reflect back on the young man who lost his life in the subway over his iPod. Note just how many people scrambling around him whom are employed to handle just that situation. The detectives, the officers directing people from the crime scene, the coffee shop where the paramedics step into to get coffee before zipping the young man into the body bag. You see, as an animal dies in a jungle, so many shall feed from its circumstances. This is the driving underlying beliefs to perpetuate an existence and a need for murder, the need for crime. But as any good business, perpetual income is the key, supply and demand. If you place a man with nothing into a position of just trying to survive, he shall do whatever it takes to do so. Create the playing field and master the game. Residual income is the moving force in all the world these days. It's no longer supply the demand, more so cause a need for demand and supply it. I sigh. The thought of bringing this beautiful boy into a world like this has me with high loathing for myself. Why, I ask God while trying to see my way through the whirlwind of thoughts. We come up to our block and I feel the eyes peering at me and my son. "Hello, Thothlin," said Mrs. Burke, a self-centered busybody always in the neighborhood mess and the center of all gossip. Mrs. Burke, as I nod my head to acknowledge her empty and phony salutations. "Thothlin, are you on vacation from work?" The smirk on her face gave away that she knew my situation, but I guess even a rotten person such as herself had some decency, for I was in the company of my son. I blew her off with yet another mirror of her pretentiousness and replied with, "Good evening, ladies." Samantha was sitting on the front steps of our building. Her facial expression told a story of person plagued by her thoughts. I could not help but carry her load, for my thoughts weigh heavy as well. "Hello, my men," as I leaned in to hug her. "How did it go today? And what's wrong with my little man's face? Have you been fighting?" I told her not to worry and that I would explain everything before we went to bed, and remind her that our battles are nothing in comparison. I usher my lady and child inside and tell them I shall be but a moment, needing time to gather myself so that I may still have a sound mind before entering my home and assume my manly attributes of the household. I recall that night while looking at the moon, trying to peer through the clouds, and how animus they seemed, as if spirits trying to claim me for my debts. A voice broke the night air to think as much as to watch your days pass you by, and it's refreshing to see I won't be the only one in doing so. An older gentleman broke from the shadows of the night. He was small in stature and walked with a cane. I offered a salutations to the stranger as to be as polite one can be in these times. I then said to him that he wasn't alone in thoughts of worry in these times. He smiled, and I must say it was comforting, for not if you didn't find yourself in familiar company you wouldn't have passed an eye. I guess his mild sense of humor and his elder demeanor left me at ease with him just walking up on me in that way. And from this established easiness we spark words between him and me. We sat for hours talking about everything from love to current and ancient politics. From his words I felt as if he was guiding me from my ignorance of the true world, a world of lost innocence, to today hell. After a bad joke I had shared, I said to him, "My apologies, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. My name is Thothlin Thomas, and yours, sir?" He paused for a second, reached into his top jacket pocket and pulled out a very large cigar. "Mind if I?" as he gestured if he may light his cigar. "Not at all, sir, help yourself." "Thank you, Thothlin Thomas." He placed the cigar into his lips, reached into his front side pocket, pulled out a box of matches. I watched his hands as they seemed unsteady while striking the match and moving it to the front of his cigar. The dim light as he puffed to keep it lit cast a glow on his weather face, his hand wrinkled from age. "Thothlin Thomas, I've been many an adjective to many people in this long life, but today and to you I would like to be known as Abbot."
Lord Abbot.
I stood there in a start of confusion and no doubt a far cry from my earnest, sincere warmth of my handshake, and was sure my facial expression didn't match at all. "Abbot, did you say?" "Yes, Thothlin Thomas, Mr. Abbot, and a pleasure to meet your acquaintance." We continued sharing of thoughts and opinions well into the night. I could hear the chimes of the church bell in the distance as we continued our discussion. It was getting late, and I knew that Samantha was sound asleep, having to get up early to get Christian and myself ready for the day. "Well, Mr. Abbot, I must get inside to get some rest. I have a very daunting day ahead of me. However, it was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Abbot." He replied likewise, and then asked of me, "Thothlin Thomas, may I ask you a question before I leave?" I replied yes, as I stretched my legs from sitting on the steps for so long. He then reaches into his front pants pocket and appeared to pull out a coin. And in an unfamiliar tone, one of a sense of urgency, "Thothlin Thomas, do you know what this is?" I replied, "A quarter, is it not, sir?" "Yes, a quarter, Mr. Thomas. However, this very quarter with the year 2001 stamped onto it has a history, and yes, you would assume this tangible metal has been passed around from hand to hand for years. Yet, Thothlin Thomas, the concept of a monetary system has been with us since time of man. The thought is in our very DNA, if you will. Mr. Thomas." He then leans in. His gesture was personal and seemingly for my ears only. "We have complicated ourselves by this concept, and with these neologism of the language of money perplexes most. Peace, Mr. Thomas, is in the heart and mind of a man with a simple life. To wake up with the only thoughts is what he shall teach his grandchild. To look into the sky at night without a peep from the hustle and bustle of this mechanized system, or the deafening sounds of my inner worries reminding me of it. Well, Mr. Thomas, I have chewed your ear long enough, and I bid you a good night and a pleasure to have finally met you." He then turned away and started off into the night, whistling a medley. I turn into the house to get some rest. My mind is filled with thoughts of Mr. Abbot's views of the world. I can't help but reflected and ask myself, was this God's plans for us all? If anything, he could only be disappointed. A man is standing on the corner in the late night air, and a blackout van pulls up. The man places one finger up to gestures that he needed a moment. He takes a full drag of his cigar, then places it on the ground, then hops in van. The car races off into the night. There is a team of individuals passing papers amongst one another. The man stares out of tinted windows, the streetlight streaking by as his old eyes tries to keep up. His facial expressions are one of a man of great concern. Mr. Rothschild, as a cell phone is being handed to this seemingly important person. "Hello, yes, we have met, and I must say your description of Mr. Thomas was slightly underrated. Yes, we shall acquire him, and thank you. I believe he just might be the piece to the puzzle. Take care, and may God bless you." The gentleman places reading glasses on and is handed papers. He is pointed to where to read by the assistant and where his signature shall be placed. He signs it Mr. Abbot A. Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild? Yes? The society is on the phone? The assistant clutches the phone close to her chest and everyone in van pause. A grim shadow is cast over all parties in Mr. Rothschild's company. He reaches out towards the cell phone. The assistant seems resistant in giving Mr. Rothschild the cell. One stern look and she gives in to his silent demand. Hello. Robert, you can't hide from us. This quest of yours has become an issue for us. Abbot continues to listen to the verbal lashing he was receiving from the caller. His face seemed heavy with concern, but he abruptly interjects, "We no longer wish to live by these laws that you have set for humanity. We have a right to go on without the structure you place upon us. I bid you farewell." The abbot hands the phone back to his assistant and she properly hangs up the phone. The abbot looks out into the world from his vehicle. His eyes pick up from which they left off. He takes it all in as if scanning the urban landscape, capturing each thing within his path and retiring it to his memories. "Sir," screams an assistant, "sensors are picking up a laser tag on our current position. It appears we are being fitted for a drone strike." So it has begun evasive maneuvers and ploy counter-strikes. "Yes, sir." A young boyish individual grabs a laptop from his computer case and opens it. He then starts typing away. He then slams the laptop shut and yells, "It's done." Streaking in the distance through the clouds in the direction of the abbot's motorcade was a drone fixed and ready to strike. These drones have no conscience, they are simply killing machine, and the device of their demise was rapidly approaching. The drone now has a fix and has begun trying to get the van in its crosshairs. A lock-on has signal and the drone mysteriously exploded. A smirk came over the face of the boyish hacker and the abbot acknowledges his deeds with a grin. The dossier of this young man is quite astonishing. A graduate of MIT, 4.9 grade point average in computer science and programming and design. He was a billionaire by the age of 17. He was a leading scientist in his field of nanotechnologies, developing nano drones for the government weaponry. The nanotechnologies he created was nothing this world has ever seen. He developed nanobugs so small they would attach themselves to air molecules at lightning speed to deliver any information, changing the functions of any electronically device used to spy, or any information, changing the functions of any. Seems Mr. Abbot had surrounded himself with like-minded individuals. His assistant Marolyn Finch, the woman whom was not so willing to pass him his cell earlier. Miss Finch was a Harvard professor and had made her millions in publishing. Her book The Lost Society had made for a bestseller. Her noteworthy accomplishment had even landed her Secretary of State during the Clinton administration. Bodyguard and driver Len Wentworth and Sam and Chad Rockwell were all ex-Navy SEALs and whom carried out Mr. Abbott's, let's say, underhanded misdealings. Chad looks back from the front seat and stares at Mr. Abbot, watching his eyes connect to images of still objects while in motion. His eyes seem to quiver from it. "Mr. Abbot, where do you gather your faith in all of this? It seems you'll have enough of it for all of us doubters," Chad said to him as he himself looked for faith. Mr. Abbot then turns his gaze toward Chad and says to him, "Chad, have you ever watched an ant?" Chad replies, "Yes, at some point in my life I am sure I have, sir. Why do you ask?" The abbot goes on to say, "Well, Chad, you may look upon an ant on a tree, try to understand if it realizes you're present. Break the life off from its branch and note that the ant may not realize your presence nor understands neither its plight nor its fate, but I am sure, as you are sure it senses your presence. Driver, get me to my jet eminently." "Yes." So they all spoke in unison.